Well, if you get your Bibles, you can turn to Romans chapter 12. That's where we're going to be. I just realized there as we were singing, and I went to put my microphone on, that it was on the whole time. And so luckily, it wasn't right there, or you would have heard me probably above everybody else. So that's a good way to start the second service preaching, I guess. Anyway, we've been in this series of Romans. We've been going all throughout the book of Romans, and as we told you last week, that the Romans really is broken up into two sections. You've got really the first 11 chapters is kind of the meat and potatoes of the gospel, what Jesus has done, how rotten we are, how messed up our hearts are, but ultimately the good news of the gospel message through Jesus. And so we talked about that. We went through those, and now we're to the dessert. Right now we're to the application part. Now we're to the part that's kind of fun. And last week we looked at that passage, just two verses there in Romans chapter 12, where Paul kind of comes up on this summary statement, and he says, therefore, right, in light of everything that we've said up to this point, therefore, brothers and sisters, in light of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. And he said, don't conform to the pattern of this world, be transformed, renew your mind, then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will, right? And so we talked about that. And then today, Paul's going to continue that discussion and right into this point where he talks about spiritual gifts. And we'll get to that here in just a moment. Back in December of 2006, I remember this exactly. I remember the date exactly because I wrote it down. And by the way, parents, especially if you have young kids in the home, it's great. If your kid says something funny or they do something or a special day, write it down. That way you'll remember it, because after you get some gray hair, you don't remember these days. They go by so fast. But I remember back in 2006 in December, not because I remember, because I wrote it down. I was watching Kentucky played North Carolina in basketball. Now, just by way of transparency, I do not like North Carolina, all right, in basketball, okay? And the reason is because I had two of my best friends in college that just were, one particular, they were brothers, but one in particular was always just trash talking and always running down my team, Kentucky, God's team, and lifting up his team like he was just. And so I've just developed this sense of I do not like anything with him. Anyway, I think I've passed it to my son. But that particular day, I watched the game. Kentucky got beat, and Ethan wasn't watching. I don't know what he was doing. Again, he was 6 years old at this time. He just was doing whatever 6-year-olds do, and he knew the outcome of the game. But he didn't watch it that particular day. Well, that night, we were putting him to bed and tucked him in, prayed with him, whatever it may be. And as I was leaving the room, I was walking down the hallway, I hear Ethan yell for me, "Hey, Daddy." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Who got the tip in the game today?" Now, typically, I wouldn't remember. That's the jump ball. Like, who got the jump ball in the game? Typically, I wouldn't remember. I said, North Carolina got the tip. And I could hear him from his back there in his bedroom. He goes, "Shoot." Now, for you and me, that wouldn't really matter. Like, who gets the tip is not that important. But to a 6-year-old, he's thinking, man, I hate that my team didn't get the tip. Have you ever done something in life where you've sort of focused maybe on a small detail, but you've sort of missed the big picture? Maybe sometimes we use a phrase for this like missing the forest for the trees, right? We focus sort of on what we think maybe is really, really important, but we miss kind of the grander picture. I think sometimes young couples do this. They are about to get married, and that's not everybody, but so what happens? Spend all this time thinking about the wedding, right? We're planning out invitations and cakes and who's going to be there and everything that goes along with a wedding, spending lots of money, all of those things. And yet sometimes what happens, they do all of those elaborate things and forget, hey, I've got to live with this person, right? They forget that the most important thing isn't this ceremony that's going to last for an hour or 45 minutes or 30 minutes, but the fact that we're about to live the rest of our life together. Sometimes we miss the most important part, or we miss something really, really important sometimes for the small details. And that's what we're going to see today. I think what happens oftentimes, and you can tell me if you would agree, and maybe not necessarily now. I mean, you can if you want to. The first service they were pretty responsive. I'm going to give you a chance to respond here in just a moment. But what I think sometimes that happens is that people misunderstand what the church is all about. We assume that church is this. Like, this is sort of what we do. It's 1 hour a week. We come and we worship. And listen, what happens here is so important. This is vital to your faith. We are. The Hebrews author tells us, hey, don't neglect showing up and serving together. This is who we are. This is what we do. But we're going to see today that the church is much bigger than this. The church is so much grander than just simply an hour of worship. And sometimes what happens is, and I think even this is the danger in exclusively, doing online stuff. And again, I know why, we have to do that right now, and I'm thankful for it. But the real danger is that sometimes Christians will say this, or believers, they'll say, look, I'm a believer. I consider myself a Christian, but you know what? But I don't go to church. I don't have a church. The church really isn't that important to me. I do my own thing. But we're going to see today, listen, that the church is so important. We're going to see today that God has blessings for you, that God's grace isn't just poured out to us by our faith in Jesus, but His grace is actually poured out to you through each other. And we're going to actually discover that every person in here, you have a spiritual gift. That God has given you a gift to serve other people. And what's fascinating about this is that your gift isn't just for you. In fact, your gift isn't for you at all. Your gift is for me. My gift is for you. God gives us gifts to build up our church. God gives us gifts to help edify us, to get us prepared until Jesus comes back. We're going to see today, listen, that God just doesn't give us grace, He gives us gifts. And so let's jump into our text here in Romans chapter 12, and let's see what the Apostle Paul has to say. He says, verse 3, let's just read this. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift's prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it's serving, then serve. If it's teaching, then teach. If it's to encourage, then give encouragement. If it's giving, then give generously. If it's to lead, then do it diligently. If it's to show mercy, do it cheerfully. And so I want you to notice a couple of things right off in these few verses of Scripture. Paul gets us into this discussion about spiritual gifts. Number one, did you notice there in verse 3, he says, don't think too highly of yourself. Don't think more highly than you ought. He says, in fact, how does he say it? Don't think of you, rather with sober judgment, right? You know what the opposite of being sober is, all right? And so Paul's saying, look, don't get there, right? Don't think of yourself too high. Why is this? Why is this? Because there's a temptation to maybe, and maybe it's more, the temptation is more for those of us who maybe are out front, and maybe we have, these gifts that where people are, preaching and teaching or whatever. This is, look, don't get too excited about it. Like, don't think too highly of yourself. Why? Because we're all in the same boat. Like there's not a person in here who's any better than anybody else. If it's not for Jesus, what? We are sunk, right? We have all fallen short of the glory of God. That's what Paul said in Romans 23. And listen, if it's not for Jesus, like none of us have a shot at this, right? And so Paul says, look, don't think too highly of yourself, right? I mean, be sober about this. This ain't about you. This is about Jesus. But then he also tells us not to think too low of ourselves. When he says to think of yourself with sober judgment according with the faith that God has distributed to each of you. Now, we're tempted to think, well, that means how much faith I've got, right? That's how I need to measure this thing, just based on me again, my faith. But according, with the context here of what Paul is saying, that's likely what this means is that it's a measurement that God has given to each of us. That when we come to Christ, that God gives us a measure of faith for us to be able to trust and walk with Him. And so he says, don't think too high of yourself, but don't think of yourself too low either, right? Why? Because again, what he's been saying all throughout this incredible book, this letter, like you're a child of God. You are loved. You've been forgiven. Your life has been changed. We talked about it last week, right? We've gone through this metamorphosis. We've gone through this transformation. We're not the same anymore. Right? And so don't think too low of yourself either. Think of yourself in sober judgment. But notice what else he says. He says that each of us have a gift. Did you know that you have a spiritual gift? How many of you can raise your hand if you want to, like you know what your spiritual gift is? No, thank you. You have one, right? And the first service, I had to prompt them a little bit. Some of them, as I was asking questions, and again, this sort of depends on your background. Maybe if you come from more of a charismatic church, you're like, I ain't afraid to raise my hand in here, right? I mean, let's get them up high. In fact, your hands have been up for the majority of the service. But for others, they're like, we don't do that here. We don't really even talk about gifts. I'm just going to barely raise my hand, if at all, right? But some of you know what your spiritual gift is, maybe already. Every one of you, if you are a believer, if you've placed your faith in Christ, you have a spiritual gift. God has given you something. Not everything from heaven has your name on it, but something does. All right? So he says, each of you, each of us, we are many members, but we're one body. Right? Paul elaborates more on that in 1 Corinthians. He talks about the church, how we're many members, but we're one body, and he compares it to our own bodies, right? I have one body here, but I have many functions in my body. And Paul talks about, the hand can't say to the eye that I don't want to be part of you anymore. So each of us have a gift, and then notice that he says that each member in verse 5, each member belongs to all the others. Now, you've probably never thought about that before. Like, whoa, what do you mean? Each member belongs to all the others? You mean you belong to me and I belong to you? Like, how does that work? Well, according to Paul, yes. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means, again, that God has given you spiritual gifts to serve the church, to edify me, to help me to know Jesus better. But my gift and your gift isn't just for us. It's not because of, hey, God wants to just give you a gift because He loves you. We have lots of those. In fact, every good and perfect gift we know that comes from above, God's given us all the good and perfect gifts. But this gift in particularly is for you to use for other people. It's a spiritual gift. It's how God uniquely builds up His church. And this is why I said it's important for us to understand, like for someone to say, well, I love Jesus, but the church isn't for me. Guess what? You're missing out on so much of God's grace, God's favor in your life. You're missing out on His body. You're missing out on the church just building you up, and it's incredible, right? That's what he says. I think 1 Peter says it like this, 1 Peter 4:10. He says, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Look at that. Each of you should use whatever gift you have. What gift do I have? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a minute. Each of you should use whatever gift that you've been given to serve others. You mean my gift's not for me? You mean my gift isn't to make me look good? You mean my gift isn't to so I can get the applause? No, this gift ain't about you. You've been given a gift to serve other people. What? This is about serving. Listen, the church is always about serving. Listen, if you're a Jesus follower, it ain't ever about being out front. It ain't ever about, trying to look good, about making a name for yourself. It's always about servant leadership. So we've been given a gift to serve other people. And as faithful stewards of those, he says, of God's grace in various forms. And so isn't it incredible that God gives us his grace through each other? Like as we serve each other and as we love each other, God's grace is poured out into our life through each other. Listen, y'all, the church, it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And we ought to praise God for it more often than we do. Amen? Y'all talk to me. Listen, I told the first service, if I'm stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit today, y'all going to have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit too. So I can hear an amen. I can get a, preach it, brother, whatever you feel like, right? Somebody give me a preach it, brother, matter of fact. All right, thank you. Tyler, that's why we hired you right there. If nothing else, if you can give me a few of those ever so often, we'll be good. All right, so let's look at these gift lists. Let's look at that's the full, don't start writing all those down. If you want to write down, Romans 12, 1 Corinthians, you can. But that's the expanded list. Like that's, if you were to go through and write down every spiritual gift that's mentioned in the New Testament, that's what you'd get. There's like 22 of them. But the gifts aren't meant to be exhaustive. Like we know that there's spiritual gifts that Paul doesn't just, he's not trying to just name every single spiritual gift. If he would, he would have done it here to the letter to the Romans, right? We know in 1 Corinthians 12, he expands that list. There are others. But let's look here what he says. Look back to our text. He says, we've got different gifts according to the grace that's given to us. If your gift's prophecy, then prophesying according to your faith. You can take that down, buddy. So let's talk about prophecy for just a little bit longer than the others, because I'm going to be honest with you. This is an area where I've grown to sort of understand maybe prophecy a little bit better than I have in the past. And I learned it from Wayne Grudem in his systematic theology book. Most of the time, we view prophecy as sort of something from the Old Testament, right? The prophets. And if the prophets spoke, then it was thus saith the Lord, then you better listen, right? Because they were giving us a direct line from heaven. And if a prophet spoke, well, you would know how, if he was truly a prophet, by whether or not what he said came to be true. But in the New Testament, that a prophet was a more general term. The apostles were who we were learning, instead of it being a prophet, as thus saith the Lord, it was the apostles who would say things directly from God. And that's why our scriptures that we have, they were written by the apostles. And so prophecy was more of a generic, or not generic, but a general term. It could mean preaching. It could mean predicting the future. But it also could just be a general something that the Lord has given to somebody, maybe for somebody else, and whether it's an individual or the church. And most of us, we don't think of prophecy like that because we're thinking, well, I can't say that I'm giving somebody a word from the Lord, because what if this isn't exactly a word from the Lord? Well, again, prophecy didn't meet that standard in the New Testament. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more at some other time. It's a fascinating thought, but I believe it to be to be accurate. In fact, some of you have perhaps prayed for somebody, or been praying for somebody, or had somebody on your mind, and have you ever felt like, I just feel like I need to call them. I just feel like maybe even that the Lord sort of laid something on my heart to share with somebody. That would be at least part of what would be referred to when Paul talks about prophecy, of something that the Lord has given for others. Now, I think we have to be very, very humble if that happens. Like if we feel like that perhaps the Lord has given us a word for somebody else, we have to say, look, I've just been praying. I'm thinking about you. I don't know. Like, I'm just going to be as humble as I can, but I just feel like the Lord wanted me to share this with you. So that's incredible. You know, I think, again, we sometimes overlook prophecy. We just think of, like, that's something that happened way back then. God can use it even today. If it's serving, then serve. Now, some of you think, well, a spiritual gift is serving? Well, yes. God gives, some of you, listen, when it comes to all of these, serving, teaching, encouraging, giving, maybe outside of maybe prophecy or teaching, we could say that, like, everybody should be doing these things. Should everybody serve? Yes, everybody should serve, but some of you are uniquely gifted to serve. Some of you have been, like, God has given you this gift of service. Like, you don't have to be up front. You know, if there's a job that needs to be done, you're the one out there doing it. That's a spiritual gift, according to the Apostle Paul. I'm thankful for your servants. Again, I think we all need to serve, but I am thankful for people who are willing to say, you know what, this thing needs to be done. I'm going to get out there and do it. I'm thankful for that. Notice who else? It's teaching. If it's teaching, it says then teach. Now, teaching would be similar to what I'm doing today. Teaching or preaching. I'm taking the Word of God, which this is our standard. Again, for anytime we do anything, it always goes back to the Word. And so teaching would be, studying God's Word, praying through it, figuring out what God would want me to share, and then sharing from Scripture. Some of you have this gift of teaching. Some of you, you're not even for sure that you've got it. You know how oftentimes this gift gets found? You just do it. You don't know, and listen, that's why this is important with all these gifts we're going to talk about here in a minute, like how do you know? But like sometimes you just step out and do it. I don't know how many people I have that I know or have experienced with in churches in the past, like where they got sort of pushed into a teaching assignment, and they started teaching, and they started growing like crazy. And they figured out, you know what, I can do this because God's gifted them to do it. Some of you, maybe that's something that you try. If it's encouraging, then encourage. Should everybody encourage? Of course. But some of you, you are uniquely gifted to bring encouragement. You see people differently. You're watching. Like you recognize that Abby's kind of down today. And so you're able to send her a message saying, hey, I'm just thinking about you today. Hope all is well. Like you have this divine sense to be able to encourage. If it's encourage, and listen, if you got an encouraging word for somebody, tell it. Don't hold that back. So often, I think so often people have something that they want to say to somebody. They want to say something like, man, I'm just proud of you. You're a great father. I'm proud of, but what do? We sit on that. If you got an encouraging word, share it. Some of you, though, you are gifted uniquely. If it's giving, then give generously. Well, should everybody give? Of course. But some, again, are uniquely gifted to serve. You can see, you can see when something needs to happen. And listen, you don't have to be rich to be a giver. In fact, Jesus said, hey, the most important giver that we see in the New Testament was a lady who gave all of her money. Like she said, all these people who are coming and giving to the temple, he said, look, they're giving out of wealth. She's giving out of her poverty, right? And so giving, some of you, you're uniquely, God has given you an ability to make money, or if not, God has given you the ability to see what needs need to be met. That's a spiritual gift. Leading, some of you are leaders. And you think, well, how do I know if I've been gifted to lead? Well, just look behind you, right? Is somebody following? If nobody's following, then maybe this isn't your gift. But so many of you, you're gifted. You're leaders. You lead in your home. You lead in your work. You can lead in the church. If it's mercy, do it cheerfully. So mercy is a gift. Anybody you think mercy is your spiritual gift? Nobody? We have at least a couple. Okay, let's do this again. I'm going to get you all to talk to me today. All right, how many of you prophesy? Like prophesy? Okay, I didn't expect too many there because, again, I think this is one in our churches that we're just not real comfortable talking about. Serving, like you think this is my thing. Couple, yes. Teaching. All right, got a few. Yeah. Encouraging. Yeah, y'all doing pretty good. The first service, I didn't go through it necessarily with them. Y'all are doing good. Giving. Yeah. Leadership. Yeah. And then mercy. I asked you about mercy. No, listen, mercy people, these are my people. All right? This is a spiritual gift that I believe that God's given me. And it's odd because Paul says do it cheerfully. Well, what? No. Why does that mean that I'm going to go into the hospital room and somebody's sick and be like, woo, hey man, good to see you. What are you, I'm glad to be here. Or go in where somebody just died and be like, woo, no. It's not, I'm not excited about that. I mean, God's gifted me. I know better. But I do it cheerfully because, it's tough. Like nobody wants to go in. Listen, nobody wants to go into a situation where somebody's just lost a loved one. And I'm the same way. Like, Lord, I don't know what to say. God, you're going to have to give me. You're going to have to give me what I need here. And you know what happens? The Lord does. And but we go cheerfully because this is what we've been called to do. Now, if you don't know what your spiritual gift is, I would just say two things. Number one, I would say pray about it. James says what? He says that in James 1 to if any of you lacks wisdom, ask God who gives it generously. And so this is a prayer that God likes to answer. If you're not sure about what your spiritual gift is, pray about it. And so I would say that. And then secondly, I would say what I said earlier. Just jump in. Jump in. You don't know what it is? Then just start serving. Just start trying. Just start doing something. And you'll figure it out maybe as you go. Now, I've got a diagram here that maybe this will help you to discover your spiritual gifts. I don't know if this helps or not. Maybe it is. But this is and I had to ask somebody in the first service. I couldn't remember what kind of diagram this is. It's a Venn. Thank you. See, some of y'all knew this. I'm a little slower to games tonight. Yeah. So it's a Venn diagram. So the first one would be this: affinity. Like, what are you naturally drawn to? Is there something that you are naturally like this is kind of, I'm passionate about this, and like you know it? Is there a certain affinity where you're like, you know what? Yeah, this is just who I am. This is what I like to do. Maybe it's an area where you've truly been blessed in the past. Maybe you served in a unique area and God just really showed you and opened up your eyes. Sometimes people will go on a mission trip and they'll come back and be like, you know what? I had no idea, but my heart is just for Haiti, or my heart is for, whatever it may be. And so what do you have an affinity for? Or what about maybe you have an affinity for, sometimes it helps you to know by like what breaks your heart. Have you ever is there anything that just absolutely breaks your heart? I know for me this week, I watched a video, I shared it on Facebook, and it just talked about the years throughout our country and problems that our country's had, and particularly how people of color have been mistreated. And I watched that 17-minute video, and I could feel it coming. I really didn't want it to happen. But I got to the very end of it, and I just wept. And I cried for probably a solid minute. And so I know that God has uniquely given me an affinity for people who have been mistreated. God has given me a heart for those who sometimes are mistreated, or He's given me a heart sometimes for fatherlessness situations, whatever it may be. What's your affinity? Secondly, what are you good at? What's your abilities? What sometimes these can be a natural gifting, but like what are you good at? Are you is music your thing, or maybe not your thing? I mean, we'll get to affirmation. Maybe sometimes that helps us to figure that out. But what natural abilities do you have? Not everybody has all the gifts, but you got something. And so what kind of natural gifts do you have? What abilities do you have? And then thirdly, do people affirm that? Like, do they see that in you? And when I say abilities, listen, I don't mean that you're the best. If only the best people preached, I would not be preaching. Like, if only the best people sang or did music, I mean, it'd be very few. I think, as Henry Van Dyke said, if only the best birds sang, that the forest would be silent, right? And so this doesn't mean that you're the best at something, but what ability you have and who has affirmed it? Has somebody seen that in you? Like, you know what? Yeah, you're a leader, man. I can see that in you. You're gifted to teach. You have a heart. You're an encourager. What may it be? Now, again, there's so much here that we could talk about, but let me just give you just a few more things as we sort of wind up here to the end. Let me give you a couple of words of warning. When it comes to spiritual gifts, I want you to understand that spiritual gifting does not mean that you are spiritually mature. Just because you have a spiritual gift doesn't mean that you are spiritually mature in every area. In fact, I have to tell you that, and I haven't experienced it here, but I have to tell you that in past times, sometimes that people in churches where I've served, they had clear spiritual gifts, but they sort of hogged them. They sort of hoarded areas. They sort of pushed other people out. That's why Paul says, no. This ain't about you, right? This ain't about you and what you can do or what you think you have to do. This is about Jesus, right? Think soberly here, right? And so it doesn't mean that just because you have a gift, and even if you're using it, that you're spiritually mature. And then secondly, notice that what I just said earlier is that nobody has all the gifts. Listen, I do not have all the spiritual gifts. Right? Just because I'm a pastor doesn't mean, well, yeah, he must have all the spiritual gifts. No, that is not the case at all. In fact, there's lots of things that God has given many of you that I wish I had. Right? In fact, there's things that happen here at the church often. I'm like, that makes my skin crawl. I don't want to do that. And so oftentimes I just let other people do it. Right? Or I just drop the ball and just let somebody else pick it up. Not everybody has all the gifts. And then understand this, is that a disconnected body part eventually will wither up and die. I know that, it's easy for us to sort of separate our faith from the church. And I think that's kind of a popular thing to say, particularly in a Bible Belt area like our own. Yeah, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, but I don't really have a church home or anything like that. But what happens to your body if I were to go out today and lose a finger? What's going to happen? It's going to be gross. It's going to bleed a lot, right? But if I don't get that thing attached, I don't even know. I think you can maybe attach. I don't know if you can attach it back. Anyway, if I lose that thing, more than likely, and I can't get it attached back, what's going to happen? That finger is going to die. The blood is not in it anymore. It's not going to make it. And the same is true as that Paul says, look, as a body of believers, we are a body. We are a church. We are in this together, each member for one another, and we are serving one another. And if you're part of, if you are a believer, then you need to be part of a body. You need to be serving, because if not, and I have seen this so much, if someone becomes disconnected, eventually their faith suffers big time. See, I want you to understand today that God has given us the church, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. He doesn't just give you grace, He gives you gifts. And He doesn't just give you gifts for you, He gives us gifts for each other, to build each other up, to serve, and to help us to mature and look like Jesus until He returns. Now, I will say this. In this time that we're living in today, in the Corona era, it is difficult to kind of get plugged in to serve. I admit that it's more difficult right now because we're not able to be as close to each other as we would like to be, so things are difficult. But we can still look for opportunities to serve. We can still look for opportunities to use our gifts for one another. I spoke to a guy this week. He was celebrating his 82nd birthday, and he said, we were talking, and he said, "Hey, listen, I don't want to tell you what to preach." Of course, you know that after somebody says that, he's about to tell you what to preach, right? And he said, "I don't want to tell you what to preach," but he went on to say, "Listen, our folks, our church, and this isn't the exact quote, but just said, look, they need to know that God's called us to serve." And I think sometimes what happens is, and I think the point, well, I tell you what, he went on to say it like this. He said, the Lord's going to return someday, and He needs to see us. He needs to see us working. And He's right. And I think that, it's as we read through Romans, we see all this incredible gifts that God has given us through the grace in Jesus. That we can't earn our salvation. We can't do anything to make God love us more. We can't do anything to make God love us less. That we can't, this is nothing about us. This is all about Jesus, Jesus, our faith in Him over and over and over again. It's like, well, we got to do something, right? Well, it took Paul 12 chapters to eventually get there. He said, look, you got to understand the gospel first. You got to understand what Jesus has done for you first. You got to understand, like all of these things first, but then we're going to get to it, and we're going to get to this point to where we see, look, oh, yeah. Listen, you've not been saved to sit. You've been saved to serve. God doesn't just give you gifts or grace. He gives you gifts. In fact, that's exactly what Paul says in Ephesians 2:8. It's an odd verse. He says, for it's by grace that you've been saved through faith, and this is not of yourself, it's a gift from God. Paul's been saying that for 12 chapters. For 12 chapters, you've been saved by faith you've been saved by grace through faith. It's not of yourself, it's a gift of God. But then listen to what he says in the next verse. He says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. Paul says in 2 verses what he's been saying for 12 chapters in the book of Romans. You can't do anything about it. It's all about Jesus. You're saved by grace through faith, but oh yeah, you know why you're saved? You're saved to serve. You're saved to work. You're saved to make a difference. You're saved to be able to shower my grace onto other people so that they'll know me better. It's incredible. Listen to y'all, the church is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we are a body, and God has given us each other to help us to know Him better. And so let's keep doing that. What if we did that? What if as a church we just decided, you know what, I'm going to serve. I don't know my gift exactly, but I'm going to do what I can to help somebody else know Jesus better. That's what we're called to do. Let's be standing.